reaching out for you.
I am up against the state of Oregon, literally.
And as a mom, I'm thinking, they have parents that love them, and they can't get help.
The way we are dealing with it is as crazy as my son.
Two mothers, one goal, to get their son's mental health treatment. But after a decade of failed attempts, they're now coming to Coin 6 to expose how broken the system is.
We sent Elise Haas to get a perspective that often goes unheard. Elise, that intersection of mental illness, addiction, and homelessness is really at a breaking point here in Oregon.
It is, Jeff, and Oregon law has long made it difficult to force people into mental health treatment, also known as involuntary civil commitment. It's rooted in a belief of giving people choice and autonomy, which is a delicate thing to balance. 3 decades after those laws went into effect, along with a lack of investment in treatment, residents now regularly witness people in public in a mental crisis. Mothers in the Portland area told me their stories of how imbalanced and impossible Oregon's mental health system really is, giving you a look into what's fueling the mental illness and homeless crisis and what this problem looks like through a mother's eyes. Unbeknownst to them, 2 mothers in the Portland metro area were living parallel lives.
And he was the most curious, beautiful baby.
Teri Anderson adopted her son Joshua at birth.
But I knew something was up from the minute they handed him to me from the birth mother.
By the time Joshua was 7, he was diagnosed with autism at OHSU. They began specialized therapy, but by 13, the behavior worsened.
You know, my sweet little, genuine, beautiful boy would have these fits and pull hair out and fight and come after me. And we would both end up in the hospital. Several times we ended up in the hospital from these rages just out of nowhere.
Still under the impression these outbursts were due to autism, Teri and her husband did their best to get Joshua through high school and into the Job Corps.
Oh, he was so beautifully gifted. But there was this other side. You know, I saw my son cloaked in these black feathers of mental illness. But the little sweet boy was still in there when he wasn't in a state of psychosis.
Meanwhile, across town, Marla Knauss gave birth to her only child, Max.
I think seeing those pictures of my son just reminded me, of how much he was wanted. Really loved.
As a kid, Max possessed natural athleticism, just like his mom. Marla got him involved in numerous sports.
And it was just the most fun time of my life.
Until it wasn't. In high school, Max started to struggle, his mental health declining. First, depression, then paranoia.
The illness is progressive. No way did I see this coming. And when it happens, it is a hard left turn.
This hard left turn happened to Teri's son Joshua too. The worsening schizophrenia led to the first time her son had to sleep on the streets.
The police removed him one night when he had tried to kill us. They removed him from the house. I made sure he had his phone. I was freaking out. I called him the next day. I said, Joshua, you can come home, but you have to go to therapy. You have to take your meds. Oh, Mom, I love it here.
By the time both of their sons turned 18, not only had the paranoid schizophrenia taken over their minds, as parents, they completely lost custody of their mentally ill adult children. The mothers faced 2 options. First, they could attempt an extremely labor-intensive battle of guardianship with attorney's fees that can quickly cost thousands of dollars.
We actually have a place in the back of our house that he could have lived. We could have gotten him an apartment, private treatment. We could have done anything. Portland refused to allow me to have guardianship over my son.
Their second option would be to get a judge to civilly commit their sons to the state hospital for treatment, which is often unattainable.
because in 1993, the Oregon legislature passed laws outlining specific rights of people receiving mental health care in the least restrictive way, allowing the mentally ill the choice to participate as much as possible in all decisions that affect them.
I told him I had this special app on my phone that I could scan the doctors and the nurses to make sure they didn't belong to ISIS, that they weren't the Illuminati, that they didn't belong to Bilderberger. Hello? Does that sound like a kid that is capable of making his own decisions?
Yet the way the laws are written, it was up to Joshua to decide if he wanted help. As the years passed by, Joshua and Max would spend some time at home, but inevitably return to the streets, getting addicted to hard drugs and cycling through the various systems.
When he was about 22, 23, his mental health was declining. And we would get into the hospitals and I would ask for a psych eval and would be told, we don't want to take his rights away. Okay. You don't want to take his rights away. He's clearly psychotic. He cannot make decisions on his own. Cognitively, he's 13 years old. Are you going to call the parents of whomever he may harm and tell them, because you didn't want to take his rights away, they no longer have a child? That was my greatest fear.
To force someone into treatment in Oregon, the law says they must be in imminent danger of killing themselves or harming someone else. Without legal guardianship of their adult sons or an involuntary civil commitment order from a judge, even forcing Joshua or Max to come home would be against the law.
It's impossible. I've asked for that for 10 years. I was never allowed to help my son. I was told I would be arrested if I did. It was kidnapping.
The last time Teri saw her son Joshua was in August of 2021.
He was covered with feces. I thought he was spilling water, but it wasn't. He just was urinating. He was filthy. He wasn't there. He was a shell. And on the way home, I just thought, Portland is not only denying him the right to be treated, they're letting him die a cruel and inhumane death. And on the way home, I just prayed, God, take him.
After a decade of begging for help and fighting for custody, God answered Teri's heartbreaking prayer.
We found out he had been lying in front of Salvation Army for 40 hours with employees walking over him.
Joshua died of a drug overdose outside a doorway in downtown Portland. While relieved he'd no longer be at risk of harming others or have to sleep another torturous night on the streets. Teri can't help but imagine a life he could have lived if involuntary commitment and community treatment for the mentally ill weren't out of reach.
My son was extremely dangerous. He was red flagged from every shelter. He needed to be put somewhere where he couldn't hurt someone, where he could be medicated.
Marla has also tried paying for an apartment for her son, but lost thousands of dollars in the process.
He's not well enough. And even with the medication, he really has to be supervised. He can't go shopping, he can't drive, he can't do his laundry. He even has to be, coaxed into bathing and brushing his teeth. Cooking is risky.
Marla couldn't get her son civilly committed either. As a result, she got a restraining order against him to purposely get him arrested for everyone's safety.
I've had to resort to the justice system to get help. Like, why does it have to get this far? We all see people with mental illness on the street. They all have caring parents. I mean, every one of them had parents that tried. And I'm faced with the last resort where he can't live with me because he's combative and gets upset and then takes it out on me. I can't live with that. Or he's outside because there's nowhere to put him, literally. And what does it say about us as a society when our most vulnerable are just literally left to die? And we have become so desensitized that we can just step over them.
While Teri's son died at 28 years old, Marla's 25-year-old son currently sits in jail after assaulting and beating her in their home. He sits a prisoner in his body and in his mentally ill mind. Marla says it shouldn't have to be this way.
The life of my son is worth something to me.
Yet she's left with no hope that her only son will survive this living hell.
Marla and Teri are advocates for early intervention, more psychiatrists, and lifelong facilities to care for people like Joshua and Max who have severe and persistent mental illnesses. More than anything, these mothers want to see change. Coming up tomorrow at 5 p.m., my special reporting continues as I dive into the data on the mental health care system in Oregon and search for solutions to the nightmare these moms have experienced.